It's 6:30. Let's begin. Welcome to the leadership team meeting. I'd like to start with 72 seconds silence to remember those who lost their lives in the tragedy. And before we do, please remember to turn off your phones like you're doing right now, and computer switch B. Apologies for absence, Councillor Will. I don't know from the others. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? John, you have one.
Yes, I'm a trustee at Young KMC and I will declare that for the youth paper later.
Minutes of the previous meeting, and I sign them as a diary.
I just wanted to note that I actually was here at the last meeting, but I'm not listed as being present.
Ah, okay. Good, well, I'm glad you finished that. Apart from the fact that Ashford is reported as being absent, otherwise you're happy with the minutes? Thank you. Can we turn to the first item on the agenda, which is the the future grant for support, the education and training consultation outcome and for the update. Okay, so this report asks us as a leadership team to confirm the final arrangements for the education and training component of the future graduate support programme for the bereaved survivors and the immediate local community. And you'll remember that the programme is funded through the restorative justice element of the Global Settlement Agreement, which we approved in January 2023. And this report follows extensive consultation, engagement, co-design, which was, we were asked to lead this consultation work with the independent scrutiny from an external scrutiny team, and that's what we've done. And you'll remember that in June, we approved final models to support the bereaved survivors who need the immediate community consultation, and then this one is one for education and training. All the consultations included, and we're being asked to approve the outcome of the consultation so that the plans can then be implemented. So that's one thing. Secondly, the report summarises progress made since we made those other agreements in June 2024. So this is really an update on the final stage and explains how the feedback we've had, the comments we've had have changed the final model. And it also gives us an update on the progress with the implementation of the bereavement survivor and community consultations. So the first lot launched in June, The full service is expected to launch in October as the dedicated service comes to an end. And for the immediate community support, you'll remember we've got an implementation support group to ensure that resident voice is central to how it's implemented. And finally, so basically it's an update on the consultations which just ended. It's a look at what progress has been made since our last meeting. It is a look at how the implementation is going to go. And finally, it's an update on the broader commitments that external scrutiny team have asked for from the council. And they've given us, in this report, you'll see more detail on the wider commitments they want from us in order to facilitate really a more restorative and supportive environment for residents going forward. And section 7 shows how we intend to support, well, respond to those. We can't respond to them immediately now, but we will be responding to them. So I hope that was a bit outlined. And having Joe, Lauren, I'm here to answer any more detailed questions. So, who wants to begin? Josh.
Thank you, and thank you to the team for the report. I think it lays it out very well, especially the restorative justice program and the trust that's been put in the council in order to kind of speak with brief survivors about the outcomes and the services they would like. Just all I'd like to say, it also really balances well with the JSNA too, and especially some of the aims for the not just brief and survivors, but the wider North Kensington community as well, and how that all lines out really well together. So I'd just like to commend everyone for ensuring that the whole council is across the one piece of brief. One question I did have though is on the mental health support in schools. Now this is really important, of course, mental health. We often hear from children and young people that mental health is really important to them, especially post Grenfell and COVID as well. We've made about £175,000 available for that. My question is, how does that align to the money the council's given to mental health support in school through the COVID support fund, which is a reserve fund that we've agreed upon, and the commissioned mental health services that ASC has provided directly to schools as well? As it all lined up together, are we doubling up? Hopefully not, but how do we kind of, how's that been broken down in terms of the services provided there?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And just for one point of clarification, if it was proposed that it would be 175,000, and in the final outcome, the consultation that's gone up to 295,000, in line with community feedback about how important it is in accordance with your comments. These services are essentially replacing some of the services that we've been commissioning under the Grenfell Recovery Programme for the last 5 years, and that ran naturally for the first year themselves through community organisation. And so we've spent quite a lot of time working with the council to make sure that they align with the examples that you gave, but also the NHS's work, Trailblazers' work, and the like, and they do pitch in a slightly different way. So that I'm confident they don't duplicate, but I think we can always do more to make sure that we get the best out of all of the investment. And we continue to work hard with the NHS to understand what their offer is going to be from a Grenfell perspective to these children and young people, either delivered through St Charles or in the community or at schools. And it's an area of anxiety for us to make sure that we get that right, and then we make sure the NHS continue to invest in the way we hope they will.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
Catherine, thank you.
First of all, thank you very much. I know this was a really difficult and complicated piece of work to do, so thank you to all of you for doing this. And I also particularly wanted to thank you for being sort of flexible and listening to the schools. As you mentioned in the paper, with the initial report that came out to us, some of the schools felt that the Centre of Excellence wasn't where they wanted all the things to take place, all the different services, that they felt that they wanted to have them delivered in their own schools, the local schools. And certainly members from the FCS schools team spoke to them, I spoke to them, and then I know also you've all spoken to them, and it's great that you've now explained in the paper, but I maybe not as clearly, and that's why I want to bring it out clearly, that now the implementation of that is something that's not set in stone, that you will then work with those schools after we've agreed this as to how exactly some of the services will be delivered to the schools locally, and for the children who go to school outside of the borough, those will be the children that visit we're now calling Centre of Excellence, but you've also agreed to change that name or have a group of young people work on changing that name. So I think that's great that you added those into the paper, but I'm just saying this so it's highlighted for people that might not have picked that up and read the initial that you have been flexible and you have really listened to what the local schools community have been saying about it. So thank you for doing that. And likewise, the increase, as you just mentioned, 225 for the 1,000 for the mental health, and to keep the current services running until the end of the next term, so that there's no drop off or gap in any of those services that are happening in schools. So thank you very much for all the work that you put into this.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And just to say really clearly, tomorrow we will be writing to all those providers, ensuring that they're aware formally of those extensions on those terms, because we know that time is tight as set out in the paper.
Kim,
Actually, thank you again. Good report. Just really following on from what Catherine was saying. Under 6.8, we're obviously now going into the final phase of engagement before this comes back to the leadership team in the autumn. I just wondered, is there any going to be adjusting for sales in terms of that consultation? Is there any particular areas that you feel, in light of what we've done so far, that we need to concentrate on?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think in terms of obviously there's the 3 different consultations, and at 6.8, I think you're referencing the grievance survivor consultation. But yeah, so I think on that, the grievance survivor consultation is slightly different to the education and training consultation and the immediate community consultation, partly because we have the existing dedicated service. The model that grievance survivors have put forward has got a lot of consensus behind it. They're very clear about what they've been accessing and what they would like to access going forwards. And therefore, the amount of opportunity to change, the amount of focus the EST, for example, have asked us to place on implementation is much less. In the other 2 consultations, as set out in section 7 or 6.10 and onwards, the immediate community that Joe might want to come to, there's a lot of work to do within the immediate community consultation to make sure that we're really taking that forwards and continuing to listen to residents. As Catherine said before, we'll be doing the same on the education and training. So on those 2 parts of the programme, I'd be very surprised if by say year 2 of delivery, the services look like they do from now. And that's all what we've learned through the dedicated service, through the Growth and Recovery programme, is you cannot be truly listening to residents and people who you're supporting if the services you're delivering are not changing and shifting, because people's needs are different. Do you want to know?
and also, is that reflecting that your implementation steering group, that they're quite, from what I can read the report, that they're quite tentative in the sense that they want to make sure that you then go back and door knock and go out again just to make sure that what they and you have come up with actually does echo again. So going back again to double check.
Exactly. So there are more choices to make left
Yeah.
to make on the community model, and there's also, I think, greater scope for it to evolve more over the 4 years. In the first instance, the mechanism is the implementation steering group, but as you say, the steering group really have challenged us to make sure that we are consulting more widely on that, through door knocking, through reaching out to people, through communicating to people about some of the choices that the group is considering, but also to make sure that the final accountability sits with the council as decision maker, but that those decisions are really shaped by the considerations that people have raised through that process. So we're on the community model, we will be coming back probably in October with the sort of outcome of that process. But so far, at least, the implementation steering group has been brilliant in bringing some of that kind of resident perspective to bear on some of the choices that we've got to make. Going forward, beyond the kind of model agreed in the autumn, the external scrutiny team will really be developing a set of scrutiny and monitoring arrangements, which will then, I think, will also need to speak to how the model can evolve over time, over the course of the 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Cam and Joe, and a really excellent paper, incredibly thorough, a huge amount of work in here, and rightly so. So just a question about the kind of the broad split, the 50-50 split. Has there been any pushback on that since it's been discussed? And also, when you talk about implementation, would this be something then that you may then be reviewing, or is it too big a headline aspect to review? That makes sense.
Sorry, just to clarify, to consider the 50-50 split, I don't think we'll be reconsidering that. And actually that came from initially bereavement survivors and community. We took them two decisions during phase 3. We asked them to make a decision around the split between children and young people and the split for adults, and whether they were comfortable with that. And from that came their proposal that it should be a 50-50 split between bereavement survivors and the community. So I don't think that we would be in a position to readjust that over the years. But it very much came from them.
No, that's good to hear. Thank you. And then just about the bursaries, because again, when I was in communities, that was something that came up a lot. About bursaries, about helping to into universities, and how confident are you that we'll be continuing to work with some of our existing very good providers like Into University and many others within this programme?
Yes, I suppose they're different. They're slightly different programs, aren't they? Into University would run normally within a school or a college provision, and if a school or college felt that particularly needed
Clemens
funds,
and St James. But
but if they felt that they needed additional funding for a particular child, then the way it's been set up or proposed at the moment is that through the implementation phase, we would look at schools being able to make applications on behalf of children and young people, and Clemens and James social workers. So there's a wide variety of people who could request funding to refer into programs like that to ensure that they can continue to access it if that's the best fit for them.
Before I come on to the next question, I'd just like to say, I think it's just a small typo in 5.7. Talk about an 80-20 split between adults and children. I.e. adults would get 80 children.
That is a vote.
So
Last words.
just not on just want to talk about splits. Johnny.
Yep, I think this seems like good work. I wanted to draw attention to page 121, where we reflect on the positive impact it sounds like the co-design service standards have been making. That's been a big piece of work in the customer access team, and I'm really pleased to see it reflected here as something that people think is making a good impression. It's timely too, because we're actually bringing our implementation plans to the OSC on Wednesday, and it's a live piece of work. So I think the work that we're doing hopefully coheres with what people are looking for out of this consultation. And then if I had a question, it's probably just around 5.15, where it talks about there being some people who are not as happy with the outcome of these consultations, and our desire to keep a dialogue going with them to ensure that we're serving all of our communities. Maybe you can talk a bit more about how we're doing to make sure that we serve everybody. It's great that there are lots of people that are happy with the progress that's being made, but how are we thinking about those who might be less happy?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. It's a key part of this process of learning for us through this consultation is the clarity that as you try and co-produce and co-design services for people from scratch, that while you hope to be able to bring everyone with you, fundamentally at points people have such different views that isn't possible. But it's not just about listening, but doing what people ask. It's about trying to find that way of a way forward that works for as many people as possible and that people can understand. And so we've worked hard, and Catherine's highlighted examples where we've had feedback where people really have not been supportive of what we've done. We've worked hard to change and to listen and to amend. But there are some bereavement survivors who think that the process for the bereavement survival model isn't quite how they would have done it. I was on the phone with someone today to understand their considerations and to think about some of those drivers. So our doors will remain open. We'll be proactively in reaching out to all those people who we know feel we could have done something different, both in terms of understanding what that is, whether there's another way of meeting what their requirements might have been, which I think there are in some cases, but also ensuring that they understand how to work with where the scrutiny system is designed to see that if actually the model that we put forward isn't quite right, then there needs to be change, that we can try and explore some of their suggestions too over the course of the
I just wanted to thank you for all you've done, and also to all the bereaved survivors and residents who have given us so much time.
Yes.
I think, it's been a long haul, but they've stuck with you, and most of them have. And I think also the external scrutiny team has been interesting because I think they've provided some challenges. But I think some of their inputs have been very helpful. I think particularly when we come to the Fair Action Plan, which we're going to go back to consultation on. And I guess my question to you is, with all the challenges that they faced or they presented to you, how do you think we can share that across the council?
Yeah, and thanks, Sarah. And I think that that is the challenge, and what we've seen in some of their feedback, which is basically builds on their engagement with the community, and we heard some similar themes through the Grenfell Legacy conversation, is that although the council is making changes in some areas, those changes aren't necessarily always being felt by people. And Councillor Fallacici, as you mentioned, service standards, a good example of some work that we've done, and actually we've had quite a lot of people spontaneously say to us, why don't you consider some kind of standard of service? And we're able to say, we've already got something, but that tells me that we need to do more to communicate what some of the work that we're doing, and to create some of those forums for listening to people. We've said we would come back first to the Open Scrutiny Committee and then to the leadership team in the autumn with more detail on addressing each of those recommendations. I think at the heart of that approach has to be sharing that learning across the council. We're hoping to start with that OSCE report in the autumn with some of the key lessons from this consultation, or from these 3 consultations, and look at the sorts of things we might take forward right across the piece, because you're absolutely right, both through this practice and through some of the changes that have been made as a result of the challenge from the external scrutiny team, we've done things that we've never done before in a different way, and a lot of that has come directly from the challenge we heard from residents. So I think that's one example, but there are many others here that we can think about how to work more effectively right across the organisation.
And I would say it was very helpful meeting them, personally. Because they did give us some very good advice and things that we really need to reflect on. And I think it's fair to say, if we want to become the best council, we need to listen to lots of advice. And we've listened to Hillsborough, we have advice from task force, we get feedback from the community, we have an LGA peer review, we'll have the inquiry recommendations, and we just need to remain open and listening. And actually, when I look at what the external scrutiny team says, look at page 115, it says the feeling that the council does not make spaces to listen without an agenda, and instead of hearing first, jumps to solutions. So I'm very glad that we're not responding to this tonight. And we just need time to actually listen, like Maxine and I did, and then really think about what they've recommended and how we could put it across council, what would work, what wouldn't work, etc. So I think it's been very helpful for them, and we've learned quite a lot from them.
And if I might add, Councillor Campbell, I think there's something specifically too about the kind of restorative dimension which we need to consider in our context, because we're operating in a context where enormous harm has been done to bereavement survivors and to the local community. And so every interaction, every kind of service delivery, we need to think about creating some of those spaces which do feel more restorative, where people are able to share some of those experiences before, as you say, jumping to solutions. And I think, we haven't always got it right, but through these 3 consultations, where it's really worked is where it's felt like there were spaces both to hear that from people and then to work together to think about what might be a solution or a way forward.
Yes, I agree. And what was helpful with our conversations with them is that there were things that we were doing across the council that they weren't aware of as well, because of course they've been looking at the meeting consultations you've been doing, how we've been reacting, but there are other things that we are doing across the council that are due to quite a lot of things that they're saying, actually. So it'll be interesting to see how we do respond, but we're very grateful to them. Mary, so you as chair of OSCE?
Really, just to add that, as you know, when we responded last time, we were interested in how we were going to learn from and embed the learning, which is obviously something you've mentioned as well. And that we've also spoken to the external scrutiny team, and we've talked about, we're planning our year work ahead, and I think there'll be at least 2 pieces in that which will look at the engagement or how we communicate with residents and the consultation process, one within Claire's select committee and one within the OSCE. So very much taking on board in the same way that you are, to keep looking at this and embed all that learning.
Yes, I think we've done a lot of work in this space. So it's good to actually now to see what's landing and what's not landing and what we can do better. So thank you to you, OSC, for taking that call. Claire, you wanted to ask something?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. What I came here to say, it's been really interesting to hear the discussion on this paper, and I'm very encouraged by what I've heard tonight. What I came here to say was to draw everybody's attention to, in particular, Appendix 6, which was the recommendations of the external scrutiny team. I think I don't need now really to tell you that this is actually a really valuable and important opportunity for the council or the leadership team particularly to take away that learning and to move to a more, as you say, restorative space. But I think we also need to take our hats off to the external scrutiny team and to the Grenfell Partnerships team, because as we've heard, they're operating in quite a difficult space. There has been a lot of harm done. There's still a lot of pain and anger. So I think to have got to this point is really an achievement, and I'm really pleased to see how the direction of travel and there's a responsiveness is built into what is planned and the listening again. And I think those two teams have really been the saving grace for a process which we mustn't forget was agreed without any input from the majority of people for whom this programme hopefully will make a big difference to. And before I let you move on, I just wanted to also raise again the fact in particular regarding the immediate community. We have a figure of 10 million over 4 years for a very large amount of people affected, which was an arbitrary figure selected again, not with reference to the JSNA or those affected. And I just want to put on the table again for leadership to consider the possibility that perhaps, given the new assessment of the need and the new understanding of the scale of the impacts, that further funding from perhaps council and its government partners may be apropos, rather than relying solely on something which is part of the Global Settlement Agreement.
Can I echo those words which just say thank you? I mean, it's been an amazing piece of work. And also with you pass on that, thanks to the external scrutiny team as well. As I think everyone's had their say and wants to comment, can we please agree the recommendations in paragraph 2? We now move on to the next paper, which is a productivity plan, which was asked by demanded by the last government, and this is it, and you're putting it in. So over to you, John.
Yeah, so as you say, this is a paper that's a new requirement passed on from the previous government. I think what it seeks to do is it starts by assessing context, and it talks about the rich diversity of this borough, and also some of the problems, so for example, around our financial climate, but also opportunities for transformation. I think it's helpful that it sets out the context around the council plan too, and our ambitions to become the best for a borough that's greener, safer and fairer. And some of the good work that is already ongoing. So for example, the customer access programme. I think we also try to set out some of the potential opportunities going forward. The ERP system, artificial intelligence, there are digital solutions that can help us meet the challenges of the future. And so I hope that this is quite a useful document for government to see some of the context around the borough, where we've been and where we're hoping to go in terms of productivity.
And I think, sorry, I'll just come straight to Josh.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, John. Question I have, maybe for Johnny or Mike and Lisa, is like, what's the point of the report? It's a summary of, it's not blaming anyone who's drafted the report, everyone who's done his dirty job. But it just seems like an admin task that will go into the ether and no one will ever hear from again. It's just a waste of time and resource from council officers who are, very stressed and dedicated as it is. So what's meant to be the outcome that we know?
Can I just interject? Sorry. I think it was asked.
It was asked.
It was asked by the previous.
It was asked by the previous.
And we didn't know whether at that stage whether Simon would still be the minister, in which case we did need to deliver. So I think, hence, I think, yeah, we did need to do.
Yeah, I think we didn't have a choice to do it.
Exactly.
I think everybody will be submitting it, whether the new government will use it or not, we don't know. We believe that it was a price that the Treasury exacted from DLUC to give extra money at the settlement. So in the sense that we all got extra money, or local authorities got some extra money, it's probably worth it.
Yeah, they had to prove, they're saying, if we're going to give you extra money, you've got to prove that you're going to spend it wisely and your productivity, the quicker it grows, your productivity will go up, you have no time to do all these things. And we need it in the document. That's what we should expect. Catherine.
Oh, I was only going to point out, actually, I completely agree with 3.4.4 for children's services. About the need for more money, given the sort of theme in all of this is the huge increase in children with EHCP plans and the cost of it and managing the deficit that arises from this cost. So, but as we don't know where this is landing or if they're going to do anything about it, I just throw that out there.
Thank you. Are there any?
Oh, well, just a silly question, really. Why do you use 2010 as a baseline for your staff reduction for?
That's recognised as the start of the reduction in government funding in respiratory. So
2010, okay.
that's used sort of commonly as a benchmark position.
Are there any questions or comments? Otherwise, can we just agree the productivity plan and agree to upload it on our council website? I agree, sir.
Great.
You can see, when will it be uploaded to?
It needs to be submitted to DLUC, now known as MHCLG, by the end of this week, and therefore we need to upload it to the website. I would say this week as well. We'll get that moving tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to shall we agree the recommendations in priorities? So now we can move on to agenda item 6, which is the annual Treasury outturn report.
Yeah. So this is a paper that we bring annually, and I think we all know that Treasury performance can fluctuate. I recall that last year we overperformed expectation in relation to the Treasury outturn, and this year we appear to have underperformed, but it's certainly true that the Treasury performance turns on assumptions that are made throughout the cycle, and we work closely with Treasury advisors in terms of putting together our Treasury management plan. I think given the moving interest rates and the macroeconomic uncertainty, it's been harder to forecast probably than before, and we've been subject to kind of bigger variations. And the element that's probably affected our performance most is that we've had pressure from lower cash balances, and so we've overspent in terms of Treasury, or rather underachieved in terms of income in terms of last year.
Questions? I'll start with the first question, Mike. So, given that it's very difficult to make these forecasts, do you have, can you give us some assurance that you think you'll be closer to achieving the forecasts in the future, or is this a one-off, or is this kind of, we're in uncertain times, so we just don't know?
Well, I think it's difficult to get it dead on because, especially when rates are fluctuating as they were in the year. Actually, although we've not hit the budget and we've underperformed against the budget, I think the rates we've secured have been good. So the average investment has been garnered 5.29%, and the average loan rate is 3.88%. As it says, so I think we've done well within it, but we expected, as Johnny said, to have higher balances to invest, but we didn't, because we borrowed internally rather than going out to the market, because it was advantageous to do that. But we didn't know that when we set the budget they would be. So it's important to do whatever's the right thing, rather than whatever is the best thing to do in Treasury terms, rather than return terms rather than in terms of the budget. So yeah, I think there is less fluctuation. I think we feel that this year's is we've got a more robust budget, but this was a difficult year in terms of meeting that budget. But having said that, I think we did well on the interest rates.
Yes, thank you. Jem?
My question is really around the fixed nature of our borrowing. I understand that, and obviously it means you can plan that much more certainly. But I look at sort of loans that we had from 1997, which was sort of 6.5%, and I just wonder, given there are only 3 years left to run, why we don't look to refinance them at sort of a 3-year fix that we can get today, which you haven't provided, but even on a 10 years offering some 4%, so there's probably a slight differential there. And I was just wondering, do we ever look to sort of refinance slightly higher debt, higher interest rate debts?
I mean, we do look at, it's probably the same, but we do look at refinance, and it's usually very expensive to get out of those debts that you made long ago, because obviously they priced them at the time, and wouldn't want them to be able to often to take advantage of the fluctuation in rates that happen. So I think it's usually very difficult, but we do look at whether we can refinance at various times. Can you?
Yeah. Yeah, that is broadly the case. I mean, it's similar to if you're repaying a mortgage early, you cop some additional charges on that, but it's even more extreme with the way that they structure this. So it's not usually the case that you make a significant saving, and then if you do, you still have to consider your need to borrow anyway if you're exposing yourself to other concerns within your strategic borrowing strategy. So it is something that we do consider, but it's very rare that it's actually advantageous.
Any other comments or questions? No. We're invited to recommend that this report goes to the full council for them to note it. Have to do that.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, the next agenda item is on item 7 is the final outturn report of quarter 4 revenue capital expenditure monitoring.
Yes, so the previous treasury report folds kind of into this wider general fund outturn. And I think the story here is that it's a more challenging picture than we've known before. The overall overspend is around £4 million, which is driven by £1.4 million in services and 1.3 in treasury, which we've talked about, as well as some contingency budgets. I think it's fair to say most London boroughs are overspent, and in many cases by more. And that there's also some really good work happening in the council. So I pick out, for example, adult social care, where we're pretty much in balance, despite some very complex kind of variables there. Did say we're pretty close to balance in family and children's, which is also quite a difficult budget to get right. And there's also good examples of where we've invested in the past and now realising a saving. So I pick up Kensington Queen's Law there, where the saving is over £400,000. And it shows that not only does our commitment to that cohort generate better life chances and outcomes, it's also now realising a real-term saving to the local authority, which is good news. But there are major pressures, and the biggest is homelessness still, which I've talked about at these meetings before. I think there is good work to mitigate that problem, which is good for 2 reasons. One is securing places for these people to live, because they're often in vulnerable positions, but also for our own budgeting. But the cost of temporary accommodation has grown very quickly, and so we need to keep all options on the table going forward in terms of how we deal with that. And I think over the next few years, we're going to need to be much more cautious about how we budget, reflecting on this period. There have been some some overspends arising from things that may not recur. For example, there was industrial action in parking last year, which may or may not recur in the coming financial year. So there are reasons to think that some of the picture could improve. But certainly overall, we're seeing a lot of things get harder for us to manage. There's significant uncertainty about lots of our funding streams, and as I say, temporary accommodation, the biggest of all.
Well, I think we touched on it when you look in paragraph 6.1, when you're saying the longer term, not everything may be affordable, and strategic decisions will we need to determine, how best to utilize the limited resources we're going to have. And I think this is a bit of a paradigm shift than what we've had before.
Thank you. Yes, because it's TA with being housing, I feel I need to just draw a few slightly more positive points about it, if that's at all possible, because it is a terrible situation, and we're not alone in all of particularly of London. I mean, we have, for example, saying this is any better, but Greenwich have overspent by 10 million and Enfield by 20 million, and so it is just putting where we are in context. And the housing TA overspend actually is my understanding it's 4.6 in TA, but because housing has managed to make some saving in other parts of housing, that's why we're 3 million over. So I'd like to congratulate housing on making some savings in a very hard environment.
Yeah.
But to TA specifically, we are tackling it, and this report obviously has been trying April, and even just in the last few months, we've managed to reduce the number of households down from 85 to 22. So I just wanted to share that we are going in the right direction. That's been a huge concerted effort from the housing team on that, because no one wants to be in a hotel. It's not a good outcome, particularly not for families, and also it costs council taxpayers an awful lot more to have them in there. We are working on that. I visited a hotel myself, and we held surgery there, and we came across quite a few useful ways to how to tackle some of these issues. Particularly, some of the residents there didn't actually need to be in the hotels, and we managed to solve that pretty quickly. So we are targeting it. I have no silver bullet, but it is. I just want to reassure everyone here today that it is on the housing agenda. I know the executive director's here as well, so we are on it.
Comments? Okay.
I was just going to comment on the children's services overspend of 223,000, which actually I want to commend them on it.
Absolutely.
Only on it being that little in a way, given how enormous the budget is in 50 million, and given all the pressures that they had coming in to that service at the time. As you'll read, I mean, there was, one of the reasons is because our NHS partners are not contributing to our care packages as we expected them to do.
Yeah.
So that hasn't helped. And of course, the real costs of residential and costs and other costs, and the huge increase in the SEND population in our borough. So congratulations on that. And of course, on the huge savings of the 424,000 in the SEND transport for Queensmill. So that was foresight, way back under Councillor Will when the school was built, that it has delivered those savings, which was largely needed. But I was just going to say, well done to them.
Thank you. Okay. If there aren't any other questions or comments, Mary?
Yeah, just to say that the RSC obviously were very concerned about I think it's our first ever overspent budget.
Yeah.
And raised sort of several concerns. Obviously, we were particularly worried about the accommodation budget, so it's very welcome to hear that. I think there were a number of concerns which you can find in the minutes of the OSC, but I think there were particular concerns about the level of the number of sort of spending reductions that weren't achieved, or percentage of saving reductions that weren't achieved was considered to be a bit high, and therefore a bit optimistic. And also that sometimes a balanced budget is actually the product of a big overspend and a big underspend, neither of which are a healthy budgeting sign, and that it would be in future reports be really helpful to have that more clearly split out. That you can see that what the end figure is actually a product of quite a lot of variance within the budget, which just because it's a warning sign, and not necessarily a sign of anything awful, but it can be a warning sign of that about how we're budgeting. So I think that's a kind of, and obviously we're very concerned about all of these pressures, meaning that the transformation programme achieves even greater importance in our minds about
future budgeting and the pressures on council.
And that's just your point, and this may ask you, Mike. So how successfully are we achieving our savings? Was it like 84% against budget or Mary, perhaps you?
Yes, I think it was 84. It was 16.
Right, so 16% of what didn't manage.
So, you know, whether or not that's a big, it's not a big.
How does that compare to other councils? I mean, is it?
Yeah, so it's that sort of percentage.
Is that good? Is
I
that
mean,
bad?
that's-
Is that?
I think in the past, we've done slightly better than that, but don't always deliver every saving. And obviously we ask departments where they don't make savings to make compensatory savings, which is one of the reasons we get the unders and overs that Mary talks about. So there is an element of that. I think saying really in other councils, it's getting harder to deliver the savings that are in the budget. But I think we're a long way from where, let's say, councils that are in a lot of trouble are, where they have very large savings programs, perhaps double 2 or 3 times ours, and then fail to deliver quite a lot of it. And that's when there are warning signs. So I think it's right to see there are warnings in it. We have to monitor closely that we're delivering the savings, but I think we are a long way from being in a much more perilous position.
Sure, but it's a good message to us, isn't it, as councillors, if we go into a transformation programme, that we say merrily, oh, and here are our savings. We actually have to deliver on the savings. We can't just assume that they're going to happen. Certainly not in the current climate.
And we have to be very robust in our budget processing,
Yeah.
putting in savings that are
We
subject
can realise.
of wishful thinking rather than an optimism bias. We have to be very aware of that.
As you say, 4.7, Elizabeth. Not all affordable,
Not all
hard
affordable.
decisions ahead, so.
Okay, so we agree all the recommendations in paragraph 2. Thank you. And now we come on to the medium-term financial strategy, so more doom and gloom.
I think that was in the
Sorry, sorry.
actually.
Actually, it's a good evening that we've had a really good report on what's happening with Bramford, and I think we've got a good look at what's coming with Chicago. We're sort of sandwiched in the middle of some unedifying financial performance.
No, I think it's useful to have these all coming together because the outside
Yes.
looks backward and this is the forward look, and they're good companion pieces. But I'm afraid if the outside was hard, then the medium-term financial strategy is probably even harder. The outlook is extremely challenging. And whilst we've covered some of the pressures, we can see in this report that we've got a couple of scenarios reflecting our best known case and our worst known case scenario. We can see there's 26 to 40 million pounds of savings required, which are big numbers for the council. And that includes a range of 10 to 19 million pounds next year. The biggest variable that drives that difference in those two figures is the adult social care grant, and we're not sure yet whether we will receive an adult social care grant at the same time under the new government. So there's a lot of uncertainty around that. The paper also makes assumptions around inflation, interest rates, pay awards, and council tax, among other things that we can see. But I think we also have to remember as we go about the medium-term financial plan that not only is it difficult for the council, it's also difficult for residents out there. Whilst we're grappling with things like sticky inflation and high interest rates, so too are local people struggling with the rising cost of living. And so I think it's really important that's at the heart of our decision making. Because there are a lot of people finding it really tough out there. I think stepping into that breach is hopefully our transformation and savings programme, which was touched on by Mary, and I completely share her enthusiasm for it and agree that it's even more important than before. It's going to be a big part of how we meet the budget need and try to become the best borough and be the best council that we can be. There are the 4 elements that we're looking at the moment, one of which is staffing, where we've begun process reviews, recruitment challenge, and lots of other things. But we can see already with some of the work that's happening in terms of ERP and Oracle that there are challenges in terms of getting the data together to do that at pace. and our ability to deliver all of the savings that we're seeking to realise, which we've just spoken about. We're also looking at our operational estate and trying to make it fit for a kind of post-COVID working environment. I think the way people are working is changing, and that potentially brings some benefits in terms of how we can use operational estate more efficiently, but it also brings challenges in terms of how hybrid working affects kind of the bonds that are shared between teams and trying to break down silos within an organisation. Another one is capital. But there are potential savings that we can realise if we use some of our balances more efficiently to offset borrowing. SIL and 106 are examples of that. But there is an opportunity cost, because if we do that, then some of the things that we as members want to achieve proactively are more difficult, because we don't have the cash in the bank to go out and build a spanking new street scheme if that's the thing that we want to do, or a net zero project, because we're trying to make sure that we can deliver essential capital works around health and safety and some of the really big corporate projects that have been in our budgets for a long time, like Maxilla. And then the final one is commercialization, and that's where we're working to understand opportunities within things like fees and charges, and also advertising to see if there are opportunities to generate a bit more income. Because if we can do that, that reduces the hurdle that we have to overcome to balance our books. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do. We can do it. There are lots of opportunities in what I've talked about, but we have to go with our eyes open. And the point that Elizabeth and Kim have both raised already, 4.7 is a really valid one. We're not going to be able to do as much as quickly as we might have hoped. We can still do a lots of good, but we need to be realistic, and we need to try and cut our cloth accordingly.
Josh?
Thank you, Johnny. Really, really interesting update there, and but challenging times ahead. My question is around the, understandably, the adult social care fund. Obviously, we have a new government now. We've got a King's Speech on Wednesday. We've got no doubt a new budget at some point in the next 6 months with the new Chancellor. Are we making any representations from account officer level to DHC or Treasury saying that, you know, this is some of the funding that we do need? It goes to the most vulnerable, but also goes to our overall balance and our prediction of the next so often going forward. Are we making any representations like that directly to powers that be?
So certainly as part of the LGA and London councils, there's a lot of work going on talking to the new government about the pressures that local authorities face. And I don't think they'll be left in any doubt that any reduction in spending, including in the one-off elements of the budget, will not be welcomed and will lead to a lot of problems within the sector. I mean, we are, for all the pressure that is here, I know from many of my colleagues that they've got much larger gaps to fill, and if they didn't get that social care money, which for many of them will be larger because they've got bigger budgets, I just don't think they'd be able to balance. They would be able to balance their budgets, and many will struggle to balance their budgets anyway. So it is a big problem for the new government, and I don't think there'll be any doubt that the London councils, as I say, and LGA will be telling them about that. And we will, when we get the assessment, obviously we always respond to the settlement announcement and tell them that position. It's on the position for us, and traditionally everybody said it's not enough, but obviously, but the real work needs to happen before then. As we said earlier, with the productivity plan, we got local government in general got some extra money because of that. I don't think individual councils, I mean, especially one that I suppose we are relatively in a better position than many, I think individual councils would get very far. It's best for them to stick together really in terms of lobbying for resources.
Yeah, can I just challenge you on your recruitment challenge? So 6.2, you are suggesting that efficiencies are going to reduce our overall recruitment by 50% by 25-26. That sounds like a big number. So I just really two bits. First of all, how much is that worth? and how the panel's going.
So it's 50% of vacant posts, so this 50 is vacant, we're proposing it to hold.
Sorry, page 288.
I'm on 6.2. So what we're trying to do is obviously,
Sorry, I was like, the 50% equates to what again?
so half, as opposed to become vacant,
Right,
the way you've set it up is each department has a recruitment challenge panel
okay,
where officers bring to that meeting a request to recruit to vacant posts with an aim and a target of only recruiting to half of those vacant posts. So
okay.
by doing that, obviously keeping the other half vacant and therefore making a saving. The number is quite difficult to put on it because you don't know how many posts will become vacant through the year. But there should be, a few £1 million coming out of that.
So you don't have an idea of head count then, based upon normal numbers that are being recruited each year?
Let's see, George.
I'd actually like to just come in on staffing is my responsibility. So last year, just over 300 people left the council, and as some slightly more joined the council, because some of those were temporary posts that went to permanent. So the challenge is, can we only recruit about 150 of those 300? So that's our natural turnover.
Okay.
And if that isn't possible to do it that way, then essentially we will have to do other restructuring and loss vacancies. Not recruiting to posts is a cheaper way of making staffing safe. Don't have redundancy costs.
No,
Of course,
absolutely.
it's opportunity. It's opportunities, and they don't necessarily always fall where you might choose.
Start from Catherine.
Yeah, just briefly about staffing. I suppose actually the use of the productivity paper is to highlight the levels of staffing. 2,670 staff, and we are higher staff president ratio than other boroughs. So I guess that was useful. But my question, I'm afraid, is the TA. Do you think that's realistic? Again, bearing in mind what Mary was saying about kind of warning signs and looking ahead. There's already a massive warning sign in the outturn that our TA budget's not meeting it, and we're only proposing another 500 or 1,000 a year for the next 2 years. I mean, I was being very positive, saying we're reducing it and we are working on it. But do you think that's realistic?
Yeah, it was 1.5 million for the current year as well, so and then £500,000 a year. I mean, I think it's what we've put in as a planning assumption at the moment. We need, as we talked about, to do more work to try and reduce the spend rather than increase the budget. That should be our primary aim. Obviously, if we're unable to do that, we will have to increase the budget.
Fair enough, let's keep challenging.
And I think it's worth
Thank you.
trying to do that.
Thank you. I just wanted to refer to page 273, which addresses the increased complexity of children with special educational needs. I mean, we know there's incredible uncertainty, but what is really alarming is how the speed with which these EHCPs are increasing, and the numbers on them. So 2018, from 529 in 2018 to 761 in 2024. That's 47% currently in Kensington and Chelsea, which is absolutely huge. So in terms of sort of the cost implications and the implications for schools and everything, I mean, we know that the current government are looking more at being stricter on attendance at schools, because we know that's a problem and that can lead on. We were already addressing that in the council. But so this basically, you map out all the problems that are coming, and I just wanted to say that in the light of that, it's a relief to see that 1 million a year has been agreed in the financial plans over the next 3 years to help address these pressures. Obviously, after those 3 years, who knows, we'll all be in the same position, but I'm presuming London councils and everyone else will also be looking particularly at this area, which, again, relates to the deficit that will be bouncing back to us at a time. Actually, just well, we're still giving 1 million precious, but we will also get the deficit back to be on our budget at the same time, which I can confirm isn't included in this current budget, as you've mentioned. So it's a complex and challenging situation.
Can I just ask Sarah so I can see that? Later on in the reports, in the EQIA or whatever they're called, saying that 19% of children in state schools have an additional special educational need. Is that right? 90%, 1 in 5 children.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is,
Just
and yeah, not all of those children will have education, health and care plans, but will be identified as having special educational needs support.
Wow. Yes. And what was that 10 years ago?
Well,
I'm sorry, it
yeah.
just seems extraordinary.
Well, we're identifying issues quicker and more thoroughly nowadays. So it's really difficult to compare like with like. What teachers would say, or what head teachers would say, is that they've got more children with special needs in their mainstream schools than they've ever had, and there isn't the money to fund the support that they need properly.
And just, adult social care asking for growth of £1 million this plan financial.
Yes, there's always, we're getting obviously increases year on year for people who need adult social care support. Obviously we've got an aging population. We're always having people that coming through the system that need that extra support, and of course, staffing for that support can be rather expensive. We have staffing recruitment challenges, obviously, in the social care space as a whole as well. And that's kind of one of the reasons why is that it's just an increasing cost, increasing demand year on year for that particular cohort of our residents as well.
Anything you want to add, Mike, or anyone else wants to comment on Mary?
Just a few comments, really. Obviously, we talked through it, and many of the comments are the same as the comment on the Outtown report. But just, I think people felt that there should be a real emphasis on discretionary and non-discretionary services. What are we doing that we don't need, that we don't have to do by law? And I think there was also, going back to what Sop was talking about, there's a concern that there was a big overspend on temporary accommodation of 4.5 million, but we only put an extra 1.5 million in the budget for last year, and only another 0.5 million in the MTFS for the sort of following year. And taking on board completely what I said, so you don't just increase the budget, you obviously have to bear down on the costs. And what Sop said is very encouraging, but it was just a feeling that maybe we're being a bit optimistic in how we're going to bear down on some of these costs, and that's a challenge for the future.
Thank you. I think it is indeed a challenge. Okay, so the recommendations in paragraph 2 to review the council's final position, which I think we've done, and it invites the council, it's going to go to the full council to approve the strategy. So are you happy with that? Agree. Thank you. Now we come to future relief services. Catherine, let's get on.
Thank you very much. So this has been renamed to the Future of Youth Services and Community Adventure Play. I just want to highlight that because some people thought that adventure play wasn't included in it. First of all, just to say, some of you might remember that in our last leadership team meeting on June the 5th, this paper did come and I pulled the paper because there was some uncertainty with some of our youth clubs about what we were doing and some disagreement. And again, we wanted to listen closely as to what they had to say, and we wanted to bring them on board. So as a result of pulling that meeting, we then had several individual meetings, and we had a round table meeting of which 40 voluntary sector community groups attended that voluntary sector meeting, which is a really helpful one. It went on for about 2 hours. Everyone had a chance to air their concerns about the paper, and I really hope we made some improvements, some not huge ones, but some minor but important to them improvements to the offer. I won't go through everything that's in the paper because I'm assuming you've read it, but I think this is a fantastic, a huge piece of work that the team have put together. As you can see, the enormous amount of consultation they've done with children, with young people, with carers, professionals and young people, and then a follow-up with one-to-ones with 14 voluntary sector community groups. The key thing that is absolutely fantastically, amazingly good news is that the council is committing to £940,000 of funding over the next 5 years, so per year for the next 5 years, with an inflationary uplift this year of 6%, but continuing in line with inflation. And I can't think of any other council that is committing that much money to their youth services. So really thank you to this council, and it's incredibly good news that they're doing that. Essentially, we're changing the model by agreeing grant funding, which can be bid for via partnering along with Young K&C, who will be running the grant funding bidding process. And through all the consultation, we identified 5 key priorities that we want to be addressed through that grant funding, which is mainly about inclusivity, including more people, more young women, more young people with SEND, helping learning and employability, having mental health and emotional well-being services at all our clubs, making sure that the spaces are safe and secure to encourage more people to use different spaces. But the thing that I find really exciting and I think innovative about it is that is the partnership working. And this is to have the whole sector deliver different elements of this youth sector rather than working in different silos and pulling that all together. And so that will include the voluntary sector, but it also will include our schools, the leisure centres, libraries. So there's a really holistic approach to how we can really empower the youth services and engage it on a much greater level. So I think that is good news. But I just wanted to reference, after we took this paper to the Family and Children's Service Select Committee, they had some questions for us, which was absolutely their right and role to do so. There are quite a lot of questions, so I won't read them all out here, but I want to acknowledge and thank them for the questions and challenges that they gave us, and that we also completely accept their recommendations and have given them a formal reply to those recommendations. And so we'll be happy to pick that up with them at the next FCS committee meeting. So
thank you. That's really very comprehensive. So thank you. Thank you very much. And just for the minutes, can I just say that you did notice that the Salop has recused himself from this item on the agenda because he is
he's a trustee of Young
K&C, so just need to note that he's not part of these discussions. Well, I think Salop is all, but yes, we have read the paper. It is very good news. You have done huge amounts of work, and thank you very much, because I know there were people who were unsure and unhappy with the proposals, and it did come to the last meeting, and very kindly you decided to take it off the agenda last time, so you had more time to go and explain exactly what was happening, and it seems like you've done that, so that's great. Sarah.
Sarah, thank you. I think this is a fantastic piece of work. And I just really wanted to highlight, it's not just 940,000 from the council, because voluntary sector support fund has been, so it's going to take it over £1 million just between those two departments, but also the fact that the foundation can get match funding, which I think is a mistake. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that the key strength to this proposal is that it allows the sector to lever in more money for local children, which should be a great thing.
Yeah. And just to add to that, actually, when you take in the social investment value of the actual buildings and youth service as well, I think it comes to over 2 million, actually, the amount of money that's invested in our youth services, which is even more fantastic.
Kim.
Only just on the additional match funding for Young KNC, so they raised an additional 50K for 3 years, but they're committing to a car of 750 over 5 years. Is that a big ask?
They think it's very achievable, so we'll support them in every way we can to manage that.
We were discussing earlier, because Westminster they raise a huge amount.
They do,
Yeah.
They do.
So they're almost like the model next door that we're
Exactly, yeah.
looking at.
No other questions? You've said it.
Very
So,
good.
can I give you a really good example of where we've seen this in operation? Although we haven't formalised the model, I think you'll all be aware that All Saints Secondary School are running a pilot 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. They were really keen for us to invest some money in their project. We didn't have any money to invest, but actually what we were able to do is lever services from across the sports offer, the libraries offer, in order that we were contributing to the 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. offer, which is working fantastically.
That's a great example. Thank you. Mary?
we're fully engaged, or the select committee,
Select
we're
committee.
engaged in this, and I know they've been having a dialogue, and Catherine's going to respond to them, so, no, thank you.
Thank you. Can we all agree their recommendations in paragraph? And the final paper can I see it in? Sorry. Soon. Last line where it's dealing. Okay. Yeah, it's good story also. Thank you. Which is not good. So the purchase of property increased supported accommodation to care leavers.
Just to say, I agree this is more great news. It's a sort of spend to save project that we invest 2.5 million to purchase properties so that we actually have additional places for our young people's support into housing and independent living spaces. I mean, we know as well as long term we make savings in not having more expensive places out of borough. It's actually so much better for them to be able to be in borough, nearer their families and nearer the the place they've grown up and lived in. So great news, thank you.
It works on every level, doesn't it?
Only question I have, Sarah and Dan, and Catherine too. Not just the previous paper that we've just agreed upon, but this one. How are we going to promote this amongst our community, our care leaders? Is there this real impact the council is having on people who need it the most?
Yeah.
It's a good news story. How are we going to get that out there to say, this is something that we've achieved. We're investing this money to have you close to home and the people that you know and love.
So, I mean, this is always a real priority for our care leavers, and it comes up through our corporate parenting board on a regular basis. We piloted the approach with the properties we bought at Treverton, and to be able to go back to them and say, you said that this is what you wanted, so we did, and it's working, and now we're investing more, is a great report back to them. And clearly we report it to the wider world, so to speak, through our annual self-assessment of our children's social care service. We have an annual conversation with Ofsted every year to talk about what we're doing. There's a new judgment in the inspection framework this year, so they will be looking at our offer to care leavers, and to be able to say how much money we're investing in their accommodation is a real strength.
Thank you. Any other comments? It seems a great proposal, so thank you. Mary, anything from you? Okay. Probably do the recommendations you have up to them, please. Really, thank you very much. I just ask you if there's any other business. I don't believe there is any. No, thank you very much. Please, Yes. I don't know.